My birthday was December 20th, and to celebrate, I wanted to do a special stream. A nice 13-hour stream going into December 20th, my birthday. So I went live December 19th at 7 p.m., ready for the next 15 hours. But leading up to that, I wanted to make sure I was doing something special. I thought for quite a long time about what I could do to really enhance the experience. Something to let people get involved and become really part of this little community fun event. So I thought for a long time, and I kind of came up with the idea of doing some form of a tier list. But I didn't want to get off easy, so I realized doing something like a serial tier list would just be kind of like stupid. So I put my thinking cap on and I got to work. And what I came up with, though maybe not perfect, I am more than pleased with the end results. Now, let me just show you something really quickly. This is the Colosseum, a lovely structure built and constructed to house the Legion. Of course, it has the things you'd expect of a Colosseum, such as an arena. This arena, to be precise. So as I pondered what exactly I could do to really make this birthday special, I thought, what if I put out an open invitation for anybody who would like to participate in something of a fight, something of a bout, if you will. After all, every Colosseum, every arena needs its fighters. Now, it would be easy to just talk for 5 minutes about each fighter and go into detail about why they would win or why they wouldn't win or etc, etc. But that would be too easy. Let's write a 21-page, over 9,000 word manuscript on how I think each of the fights would go, giving it also a form of continuity. Was this overkill? Yes, it was absolutely overkill. But was it worth it? I might have to say yes. So everybody, before the fights begin, grab a snack, grab a drink, and of course find a lovely place to sit, because, as of right now, the fights begin. Also, I won't go into an insane amount of detail about it. You can kind of get the gist of it just by looking at it. But this right here is the tier list I based all of these fights off of, so if you're interested, this is what it is. Take a look at it. Anyway, now we actually go to the fights. Let me explain this next section. And I'm going to share my screen with you all, because we have something to go over. So, for those of you that are not aware, 2 weeks ago, exact, I put out a little bit of a challenge. I said for anybody that would like to enter, there is going to be, for the first time, duels in the arena. So I said that we would have duels in the arena, and I asked everybody if you would like to participate. Hey, tell me you'd like to participate, or if you would like to participate with an OC, please, give me the details, any details, feats, all that stuff. This led me down an interesting rabbit hole that everybody gets to now experience with me. And also, I'd like to thank Brock. He actually does have a little voice segment coming up here. But we have 10 total entries for this. We have all of our contestants. We have Aariion, Brock, Lamb, Chara, or Jazzy's OC, Omen, Ghoulie, Savi, Shadow, Kween, and also Kween Phase 2, because there's a distinction, and you will see that in a bit. Let me show you guys this. The two fighters enter the arena. Opposite of one another, they look to their opponents, both with sword and shield in hand, both suited in gambesons, but otherwise rather unarmored. Silence fills the arena as Legate Brock takes his position as speaker and announcer for the first two bouts.
Everyone, welcome to the first ever true battles to grace the Colosseum's sands. A test of skill unlike this arena has ever seen since its first blueprint was designed. Our general has voiced his thoughts of being a fighter for this first series of bouts. He put out the challenge, and today's fighters felt the call to meet that challenge. Best of luck to all challengers, whether you need it or not. Our first bout will be between the General and Aariion. With our fighters ready, the match may... There is a moment of confusion as an odd, almost disturbing-looking bird covered in armor pecks Brock from behind, before pecking a piece of paper also in front of Brock. Of course, Brock mutters, "A thank you to the Toy Box for offering their help with medical during this tournament. They have graciously sponsored us a void-fueled respawning station. Is that safe? Never mind, we can cross that bridge when we get to it. As I was saying, let the match begin."
And with that, the match did begin. Aariion and Risen started to slowly approach while circling each other, the circle slowly closing. Finally, when they are about 10 feet apart, Risen dashes ahead. Aariion, seeing this, swings his sword in a powerful downward arc, attempting to catch Risen in his own momentum. However, Risen reacts quickly, using his shield to block it. The impact makes Risen grunt as the impact sends vibrations up to his arm. Risen then slides his opponent's blade to the side and stabs at Aariion with his blade. Aariion, quick to react, blocks with his shield and steps back. All that separates them is about 5 feet. Even moving forward one would initiate the combat. It was just a matter of time before this stalemate was broken. Taking the initiative this time, Aariion goes low, taking a wide, sweeping horizontal attack. Risen blocks using his blade this time before pushing forward, closing what little distance there was. Risen lets go of the handle of the inside of his shield, now only hanging on by the leather straps. With his hand now free, Risen pries away Aarion's shield before punching his fist forward, landing a fist to his face. Now slightly unstable, Risen presses the advantage, not letting up. He launches his fist forward again, the second punch seemingly bringing him out of his stupor. Aariion brings up his shield to bash Risen in the chest. The blow connects and Risen grunts as air is forced out of his lungs. Though with less strength, Aarion takes another swing with his blade at Risen. Not able to effectively block with the state of his shield hand, Risen takes the blow as his arm feels the full weight of its hit. Risen once again takes the offense, however, now taking his own series of slashes and stabs against Aarion. With unrelenting force, Risen smashes against Aarion's shield with his blade. Aarion takes a stab towards Risen, but he blocks it with his shield. Trying to ignore the shock in his arm, Aarion pushes forward through the blows and stabs forward. He grazes Risen with his blade, not enough to be serious, but enough to hurt, and if nothing else, be distracting. Again, they separate briefly. They continue to circle, both battered and now both bleeding. Both Risen's and Aarion's shield arms are still buzzing from the multitude of hits. They lock eyes, not daring look away from each other. Risen holds up his shield firmly. Finally, Aarion lunges, going for a stab, putting his whole body weight behind it. Risen, seeing this, adjusts his shield. The stab glides off his shield, nicking Risen's shoulder before Risen closes in. He coils his sword arm around Aarion's shield while using his shield arm to quickly grapple and lock Aarion's sword arm. Finally, Risen holds his blade to Aarion. Concede, Risen offers Aarion. Thinking for a moment, then nods. Risen unlocks his opponent's arm. With a nod and bow, both walk away. As they do, they feel a cold presence briefly go over their bodies. It's unnerving as much as it is briefly uncomfortable. After a couple seconds, the feeling leaves, and more notably, the wounds they had are closed and healed. The faintest look of purple and black mist dissipates from around their wounds. So, with that is Aarion's fight. The logic kind of behind it was just because I didn't fully know what was going on. Again, it was much more of essentially a human versus human fight. Overall, though, honestly, I would put it either top of 50-50 or at the bottom of I win, but at what cost. To my opinion, this would probably maybe even edge closer to this one. Again, that's just going based off of what little I know. This is kind of the catalyst for what is to come following this. The next fight, though, is with somebody everybody here is probably at least knows of. With that, Aarion exits the arena. This concludes the match. The next bout is... Oh right. Brock retreats into the inner parts of the Colosseum. After about 15 minutes, he emerges into the arena. Opposite of him stands Risen, sword and shield in hand. Brock cracks his knuckles, Risen cracks his neck. They both offer a sort of half smile before a loud bell is rung, signifying the start of the match. They walk forward, forgoing the traditional circling of the opponent. Both fighters carefully eye each other for any movement. They stand still, Risen dashes forward. Brock raises his shield to block the sword swing, while also preparing for his counter. As Risen's sword connects with the shield, Brock stabs forward. Risen, having a notable reach advantage, backsteps just out of Brock's range. Undeterred, Brock presses his attacks, trying to get within strike range. Brock does a series of feint stabs and slashes. For his part, Risen does well to block most. However, Brock goes low, getting a solid cut above Risen's knee. Risen stumbles but does not fall. But again, Brock presses forward. Needing to break the onslaught, Risen blocks a hit before he himself pushes forward. Similar to last match, dropping his shield handle to utilize his hand, Brock swings, but Risen moves up, grabbing Brock's sword arm and pulling Brock forward. Slightly shocked, Brock doesn't have time to react as Risen slams his skull into Brock's nose. As Brock stumbles back, Risen uses a sword and puts a slight cut on Brock's sword arm. Brock quickly wipes his now bleeding nose as Risen tries to stand full to establish a guard. Brock charges forward. Risen swings, but Brock parries. This time, Brock is the one to tear down Risen's guard with his hand and lands somewhat deep slash into Risen's arm. Risen cannot overpower Brock as Brock proceeds to punch Risen 1, 2, 3 times in the face. Eye for an eye, as it were. Risen stumbles back and falls to the ground. Brock, mostly thinking it's over, walks away. However, Risen discreetly picks up some of the dirt and sand he falls upon in his hand. As soon as Brock is close enough, Risen throws the dirt towards Brock's face. Brock manages to keep it out of his eyes with his shield. Risen, taking the opportunity, rolls towards Brock and cuts deep into Brock's leg, bringing him to the ground. By the time Risen's momentum stops and is able to stumble to his feet, Brock is on the ground. Concede, Risen once again offers. Just know the only reason you won is because you fight dirty. I mean, if you aren't fighting dirty, are you really trying? Risen offers a hand to Brock. Brock takes it and accepts the help. With the fight ended, the voidal healing takes its effect. Feeling the cold, almost emptiness, Brock scowls. Risen, used to it, or at least not against the feeling, walks back to his arena entrance. As the two walk away, each step starts to slowly look easier as the healing does its work. Under his breath, Risen mutters, "Brock is totally going to give me a lesson on dueling with honor soon." Brock, sometime later, returned to his spectator box to continue announcing the duels. He looked as though nothing had happened, with the only wound still showing any semblance of existence being the deep slash in his leg. Already having scarred over, Brock once again stood up to address everyone. So, once again, another fight well fought. Really, this is the closest one to 50-50, I'm going to be honest. And this is actually something that, like, way prior, Brock and I casually discussed. I won't lie to you. Essentially, the only reason I'd say it's fully 50-50 is because real life wise, I know Brock is stronger than me. And also I know that he actually uses, or at least is more familiar with blades than I am. Like, he actually has a lot of technical advantage, but the two things I do have are height, and also, in an actual fight, I would probably be willing to fight a little bit dirtier than, say, Brock would be. I mean, if anybody's ever watched our Dark Souls playthrough, listen, one of us is way more willing to fight dishonorably than the other. I'm kind of had to base it a little bit off of that. Just a tad. Just a skosh, if you will. I would go as far as to say Brock has an advantage, but because of the differing personalities, I'm going to put it into 50-50. I'm going to put it into 50-50 because I think overall that'd probably be the best fit for this type of thing. For the next match, we have a clash of generals, a battle between two leaders. We have legendary retired General Victor coming from his distant home to fight our own general. The rules of engagement going forward have altered slightly. Abilities and magic will now be allowed in combat. As such, the reason for the extended delay is our general needed a couple extra minutes to get ready. In the meantime, please welcome General Victor. Entering the arena is a well-kept man with a black dress shirt and yellow tie. Over that is a bright off-white overcoat with deep purple lining and gold trim. On the inside lining, stitched into the fabric, are words from a long-forgotten language, at least to mortals. More notable is the poofy yet still well-kept purple hair, lamb ears, and ram horns coming from his head. His golden eyes took in the arena. He adjusted his glasses as he noticed from the other side of the arena his opponent entered. "Ah, finally. Welcome to your next fight, Risen," Brock said. Entering the arena, replacing the previous gambeson, gladius, and buckler, now stood a suit of armor. A darker, more worn silver and that slightly shined in the light of the Colosseum. The helmet is a modified armet with blue coloring. 2 horns of twisted metal protruding from its sides. The rest of the armor is colored with blue trims and details, with a blue semi-glowing gem in the chest, a large horn protruding from the left shoulder, and on his left arm an ornate large kite shield. From across the arena, the two made eye contact. Piercing gold looked into narrow slits of an emotionless helm. Victor reached into his overcoat before drawing an ornate-handled sword, a beautifully wrapped handle, a gold crossguard, and pommel that shimmered. Engraved into the blade itself are more runes. Opposite of him, Risen put his hand behind his helm and drew out a long sword. Still ornate with a silver handle, gold guard, and pommel. A long sword that, if any longer, would be considered a great sword. A steel blade plain as any other, at least until Risen flourished the blade. In a matter of moments, the blade took on a light and dark blue hue. Those close enough could hear as the blade started to crackle and let out a constant and low hiss. Risen raised his voice. "General, I admit I don't think I've gone against someone with your level of expertise in wielding a blade. I'm honored you were willing to take the time for this duel." He nodded and lowered his head in respect to the longtime general. "Happy to be here. Always nice to have a chance to go all out a bit." Victor chuckled lightly. With that, a mighty bell rang once again. The fight starts now. The lamb's eyes flashed gold for a moment. Risen's eyes twitched as he felt something seemingly hit him before dissipating. Nothing changed, though in Risen's mind he heard a faint laughter, not his own. He shook his head before approaching the middle of the arena. Victor readied his blade before dashing forward faster than one could easily perceive, traversing the arena in a blink. His sword was met with the steel of a shield. Risen slashed down, but Lamb was fast, easily moving out of range before Risen's blade could come close. Victor took that time to get a light slash at Risen's side, drawing first blood. Risen backstepped and glanced at his side. First blood, but no blood lost for now. Refocusing, he met Victor's eyes, and he himself dashed forward. Opting to go for fast slashes and stabs, he tried to keep the pressure on. Blade met blade and held. The two fighters' swords bit into each other as each tried to gain an advantage. Risen put his weight behind the bind, trying to make this bind as annoying and uncomfortable as possible. As he forced his feet forward, he slammed a metal-covered foot onto Victor's foot. Victor grunted before he himself pulled his own maneuver. Using his mobility to his advantage, he redirected the bind, making it momentarily go wild. Enough time to separate himself from the knight. Victor stabs once again and aims true, cutting this time through Risen's armor on his shield arm. Risen grunts, shakes his head, and focuses once again on the battle. He bolts forward, a large, overly telegraphed attack. A rookie mistake. On the downward swing, Victor moves just outside the range in preparation to strike for a sloppy attack. That is until Risen's sword crackles mid-swing. Risen's grip tightens on his sword as his shield hand lets go of his shield grip to two-hand the blade. In a flash, the blade extends by 6 inches. Victor's eyes widen as the sword bites into his shoulder, going deep a couple inches. The demigod backs off to reassess. The blood drawn by the blade solidifies and freezes to the sword after a few seconds. The slash isn't enough to keep the demigod down, but it's enough to cause a momentary retreat if nothing else. Golden eyes blaze before this time. Only one extinguishes. Risen looks confused before moving forward. At least, that's what Risen intended, until he felt a blade sink into the back of his leg. He fell to a knee before looking behind him. What he saw at first shocked him, before realization dawned on the knight. He stared at the now 2 opponents. One might say it was a foregone conclusion what happened next. Risen fought with all he could, but between the steady supernatural healing of his demigod opponent and his doppelganger, it was only a matter of time. For just under 5 minutes, Risen held the line. Out of tricks and having to rely on physical prowess and knowledge against 2 opponents with over a millennia of experience, blade met blade and shield, but as they say, death by 1,000 cuts. Between the various stabs and slashes, at the end, as the lamb once again merged, Risen fell to his knees, not able to stand. You fought well, but lack of experience is a large factor. Conditioning and tricks can do wonders, but not much if your opponent can pick you apart and read you off the first movement. Victor said, crouching down to look into the slits of Risen's helm. Risen nodded as he felt ice melt, and a different cold presence started to take effect. After a minute of stillness, Risen slowly stood up and looked at the demigod. I'll be sure to work on that. I'm sure the universe is ripe for the harvest of experience. This one is where there's kind of a bit of a noticeable turn, honestly, in a lot of these fights. Lamb, I lose but put up a fight. Now you see, based off of what Lamb told me about his character, the first thing that stuck out is having over a millennia of like trained swordsman experience. Short of being as skilled of a fighter for just as long and improving over that long, that is going to be insanely difficult to compete against. Not to mention being a demigod, having that enhanced strength and overall agility, on top of being able to summon a doppelganger, a complete duplicate of him. Overall, I think I lose, but I put up a fight. I think is the best category for it, you know? Some minutes later, the arena gates once again opened. First, Risen enters the arena. He looks to the gate across from him before suddenly feeling a presence to his right. He looks to see a short woman with a knife in hand. That is before she disappears and reappears to his left. The whole time with a mischievous smile and giggle. Risen looks at the ground, his shoulders and chest rise, and at a snail's pace, slowly go back down. "You're my opponent, aren't you?" he says. "Yup, name's Chara Onishi. Hope you're ready. Your last fight was really something, so hopefully you can match that. Hopefully you can at least match that again," says the overly bubbly girl. He turns to address her, but by the time he looks to where she was, he sees she is instead at the starting point of her side of the arena. Depending on how this goes, I might need to thank my aunt for the spars leading up to this. Risen quietly mutters to himself. After a moment, the telltale ring of the starting bell sounds out. Risen takes a step forward before immediately crouching and snapping his shield to where his skull was a moment ago. Hitting that shield is a large sledgehammer. The next moment, he sprung up again, dodging a sledgehammer to the dome. Quickly snapping towards his opponent, he grabs her wrist before throwing her to the nearest wall. Risen takes the brief reprieve to actually draw his sword. However, in the moment he took his eyes off his opponent, she once again disappeared. He found where she was when he felt a blade inserted into his back. He swung behind wildly, swinging at a giggling ghost. He focused, and his arm snapped to intercept a battle axe swinging down towards him. He parried it with his shield before bashing his opponent with the flat of his shield. She dropped the battle axe before teleporting away. Risen let go of his shield's handle, picked up the battle axe, and threw it towards his opponent. As it was right about to connect, she teleported. Taking an estimated guess, Risen swung to his right. His blade connects with a surprised opponent. She hissed as the blade bit into her arm. Gone was the mischievous smile, now taking on a more serious look. She teleported again. Risen blocked one of her strikes, not ready for the second blade stabbed into his shoulder before his opponent teleported again. His mind screamed to look out above, but all he was met with was a kick on the knife embedded in his shoulder. He yanks the knife out. His wound freezes over. He spins around, narrowly dodging another stab, and inverse stabbing his opponent's leg with her own knife. She teleports to a distant side of the arena, pulls out the knife, and hisses at her opponent. Risen watches as deep red fire closes her wounds. He looks in her eyes before realizing something he wished he realized before. This wasn't human. He fought things similar before. A demon. Simple as, or at least as simple as one could reasonably say. On the bright side, she couldn't really die. He charged her. She saw this, her wounds almost closed. Then she was gone. As she teleported, Risen flicked a switch on his shield handle. The shield spun 45 degrees on his arm, and instead of stabbing with his sword, stabbed with his shield at the person who appeared at his side. They traded blows, a stab in Risen's side, a large blow to Chara's arm. More conflicting burning and freezing. She teleports again, slashing at the back of Risen's thigh as he buckled. She jumps on the fallen knight, putting a blade to his throat. Risen drops his sword to stop the blade from ending him. He rolls forward, taking her with him. As he holds on, he feels the point of the roll as his back would normally hit the ground, instead landing on the passenger on his back. He uses the momentum to stand at the end of the roll, and still holding on to her forearm, slams her into the ground. No holding back, right? She doesn't reply, instead throwing dirt at Risen's helmet. He keeps it from his eyes, but he feels a crushing weight slam into the side of his leg. He looks to see his knee bent as his opponent holds a sledgehammer on her shoulder. Risen looks at his knee, then to her. He crumples to the ground. She walks up to him, knife in hand. She puts the knife to his throat. She stops after hearing something. She looks down to see a sword sticking through her stomach. She dissipates. Meanwhile, the knight collapses. He looks at his leg before feeling a much more intense, empty, cold feeling focused on his leg. What was normally a very subtle void healing now performs an overdrive as it resets bones, mends and breaks the fractures, and reconnects tendons and muscle. After a few minutes of laying there, he stands again as he walks towards the exit of the arena. He looks up to the spectator box, where he sees the person he just fought sitting just fine. So anyway, that was the fight with Chara. Now, how can I say this? It was essentially fighting Looney Tunes logic. So technically, I won. Technically, yes. I think it was really a 50-50 bout, you know? Here's the thing. If Brock is like the perfect 50-50, Chara is probably right below Brock with just a slight advantage against me. Again, teleporting as well as Looney Tunes logic is never fun to fight against, as well as some infernal type healing being a demon. The only reason I argued experience against a teleporting foe is because of stuff you will probably see here in a bit, right? You'll see what happens here in a bit. Things are about to get a little wonky going forward, I won't lie. Brock stands up. Next, we have a newer name for the fight. Please welcome Radiant Omen. Down on the field enters a man, wearing a mix of leather armor and standard plate. He reaches to his hip where lies a katana, runes carved into its grip. Shortly after, Risen entered the arena as well. He looks at his opponent, he sees the katana, and underneath his helmet, his eyes narrow. The bell rings and the fight starts. There is no slow circling, there is no teleporting, but there is a fully armored knight charging his opponent. A confident smirk appears on Omen's face. Omen changes his stance. Risen, noticing this, doesn't slow down. However, his hand goes to his sword's handle. Omen raises an offhand and a beam of magic leaves his palm. Seeing the hand move causes Risen to roll to his left, but keeping his momentum as he does. The beam goes wide, another shot at Risen. This time taking on the shield. Risen, just a few feet away now, notices the hand of the hilt. With shocking speed, the katana is drawn, and in a downward arc, a slice is made toward Risen. The carvings on the hilt glow as the blade goes down. A loud metallic clang rang through the arena, Risen's bracer catching the blow, the katana barely breaching the thick bracer's plate. Omen made to retract the blade to strike again, but was cut off as an armored hand wrapped around the blade itself. Risen twisted and ripped the blade from his opponent, briefly inspecting it before throwing it into a nearby wall, the blade burying itself deep into stone. A magic beam hit Risen's pauldron, causing it to shake and have a slight scorch mark. Risen walked toward his opponent with his shield loosely in front to block any incoming blasts of magic. Once close enough, Risen grabbed Omen's wrist before another blast could be sent at him. "Concede," Risen said, looking down at Omen. With a short nod of his head, Omen conceded. Risen let go and walked back to his entrance without a word. Omen went to get his blade, pulled it from the wall, and left as well. There was a bit of an awkward pause at the shortness of the battle. However, Brock stood up. I don't want to be mean, but there is a reason for this outcome. I want to make it clear there's a reason. I was given two things to work with, katana and light and like magic stuff. That's all I was told about the OC. There was no details around. Really, this was probably the, I'm going to be honest, the rest of these fights, this is the only one going here. Everything else from this point on, y'all are about to witness what fear looks like. I ain't gonna lie to you. Well, with that, we would like to welcome a friend of the Legion, hailing from the toy box. Please everyone welcome Ghoulie B. This time entered a tall, imposing figure, a large, muscular frame, stitches littering their form, their face an unmoving, unwavering smile. White high-top shoes with black dress pants, also with white stitches across the right leg. They towered over all previous challengers. The Frankenbun stood there, arms crossed, his static eyes locked toward the opposing entrance as the form of Risen emerged. "Hey, Risen," Ghoulie said from the opposite side. "Hey, Ghoulie," Risen said as he met the void entity's eyes. "Man, We both know how this is going to end. You can always concede before we start, you know. Call it early. Ghoulie offered genuine concern coming through his distorted voice. Risen chuckled. You're right. This is a foregone conclusion, as it were. But hey, even certainties can be entertaining to watch. Risen offered as he reached his hand behind him, not yet drawing his sword. Ghoulie sighed before cracking his knuckles. I'll try not to break you too bad, bud. And with that, the bell was heard. Risen drew his blade, both set into a dead sprint towards each other. With their rapid approach, Risen raised his shield as Ghoulie raised a fist. Suddenly, Ghoulie morphed into a floating ghost that goes right through Risen. Shocked, Risen turns around in just enough time to block an incoming haymaker from the once again full-height Ghoulie. The punch echoed in the arena off the shield, causing Risen to slide back a couple feet from the force of it. Ghoulie walked forward, shoulders squared. Risen readies his shield once again before meeting Ghoulie. Risen tanks another attack on the shield before launching one of his own, a large downward swing with his sword connected with Ghoulie's shoulder. From the wound, leaked voidal energy. Ghoulie barely noticed. A large stitched hand grabs onto the blade. Risen refused to let go. A losing battle, but an advantageous one for one of the fighters. Ghoulie, using one hand to hold the sword, cocks back his other. Their fist once again meets the steel of a shield. Again and again, Risen not getting sent back due to holding onto the sword tanks every hit, or at least tries to. With a final punch, something aside from the thunderous bang of steel is heard. A crack and pop. Risen is once again sent flying, this time without his sword. Now with about 30 feet between them, Risen stands up, his left arm limp. He looks at it, contemplating, before getting in a stance to dash forward again. Ghoulie drops Risen's sword. You can always concede, Risen, he calls. Risen launches forward. Ghoulie's fist seems about ready to meet Risen once again, but instead Risen narrowly dodges it. His right hand quickly grabbed his disregarded sword. Risen rolls out of another blow before stepping in, this time striking true. Risen's sword connected with Ghoulie's side. The only way out of this arena is through knockout or until I can't get up. The smirk was audible, at least until Ghoulie once again punched Risen, this time square in the chest. The knight goes flying once again, taking the sword in his side out. He throws it into the wall. Ice particles break off as it stabs into stone. If that's the way it's gotta be, so be it, I suppose. Ghoulie took a stance, as did Risen. With a quick look, Risen clenched and unclenched his armored right hand. The sharp metal talons lightly shine under the lighting. Then bolted forward once again. He had a plan. Not a winning one, but a plan nonetheless. Ghoulie sent a punch forward as Risen charged into them. He caught Risen's shoulder, but instead of falling back, Risen jumped. Slightly surprised by the sheer audacity of the maneuver, it gives Risen 2 seconds. As Risen practically vaulted over Ghoulie, his talon hand reached for the Frankenbunny's ears, or at least one of them. With a grab, stab, and pull, one ear is torn from its stitching. Risen lands on his knee. As he tries to stand up, he gets a high top-covered foot to the side of his head. The juxtaposing momentum puts Risen in the air, but close to the same spot he landed. As he floats there, he looks up to see a comically large hammer falling towards him. On the face is a familiar smile. Dang is all Risen can think of at the moment, before being slammed into the ground by the Ghoulie bonker. Risen's vision is then suddenly trapped in his own helmet. Inside, he sees that same smile, before an inhuman screech is let loose to reverberate within the helmet. Eventually, his vision is regained, and to the side of the helmet, he hears a much more high-pitched, distorted voice on the outside. Ghoulie shrunk down quite a lot, standing about 1 foot, standing right beside Risen's helmet. Ready to call it quits, buddy? Risen tried to rotate his head before finding that trying to hurt. Trying to move at all is impossible right now. He stared at the blue sky above through the slits of his helmet. Ghoulie, transforming back to the normal size, grabs Risen by the torso and throws him onto his shoulder before starting to walk towards Risen's arena entrance. I told you to concede, Ghoulie simply stated, and I said I wouldn't quit till I couldn't move or got knocked out. You know what? You did say that, but also, look where that got you. With a sigh, Risen just quietly says, "You may have a point. Good fight, though." Yeah, you did your best. Finally reaching the arena entrance, Ghoulie goes a bit farther in before putting Risen down. Voidal healing energy doing its job. Risen sits there for some time. Bones are snapped back into place, or replaced by void if as needed. Ghoulie returned to their seat after a few minutes. After all this, Risen had one thought going through his head. I need to see a chiropractor. So anyway, this was a foregone conclusion as stated at this. Listen, Ghoulie is going to be the first person in the I get destroyed, reduced to atoms category. It's over. It is absolutely over. There is zero possibility of winning there. It's just the way it is. The freaking ability to shapeshift, insane strength, as well as dexterity. He's not wearing armor. He can just punch and kick really well. Not to mention, I like the idea of being able to have like some sort of vocal attack. I thought that was a cool idea, which also, if you guys aren't aware, especially for helmeted like fighters, like head noises and stuff like that is easily, it's like getting hit with a flashbang. Another 15 minutes pass by before the arena once again has a participant enter. This time, a woman with long brown hair. Long brown hair and pale skin. 2 horns sprouted from her mane of hair. She wore a flowing purple dress with various leaves and flowers intricately included in her clothing. On her right hand is a staff of twisted wood, and leaves seemingly orbiting around it. Brock stands. The next opponent has arrived. Everyone please welcome the Dryad of the Planar Forest, Savi. Brock's voice boomed once again across the Colosseum. As the spectators cheered, Risen walked out to see his opponent. A nod from Risen and a smile from Savi are exchanged as they get ready for the bell to ring. And like a gunshot, the bell echoes in the arena. Risen starts to move forward before stopping, looking to the ground. He sees plants sprouting from the sand. Trees growing full in a matter of seconds. What was once an empty sand arena is now a flourishing ecosystem of flora. Confident strides forward turned into short, calculated steps as realization dawned. He was not just fighting an opponent, he was fighting everything under her control. And with that thought, Risen drew his sword to hack at a piece of wood that had tried to sneakily wrap its tendrils around his foot. While doing so, he didn't notice a fly buzzing above him. Call it a shock when the fly turned into a large bear now dropping on top of him. Though not trapped by oaken vines, he was currently pinned under a bear who was thrashing him around. He tried to angle his sword for a slash before the bear transformed. What was once a bear was now a small rat, scuttling into the underbrush. Hidden once again, Risen quickly stood and ran through the forest, cutting vines and anything that looked like it could possibly trap him. Standing still wasn't safe since the force would try to consume him. Running wasn't safe because it left him exposed. He was trapped in a game of cat and mouse, and he sure wasn't the cat in this scenario. His head snapped to his right as he heard a slight noise. He turned in time to catch a jaguar on his shield. The jaguar backed down before transforming back into a rhino, crushing some of the smaller trees in the area. With a huff, the rhino charged down the knight. Seeing an opening, Risen dodged to the left, taking a slash at one of the legs. The cut slammed into the rhino's back leg, causing it to trip. Risen tried to get up to pursue the fallen opponent, but found his leg trapped in wooden roots. He couldn't pull his leg free, so he started hacking at the wood with his blade. Meanwhile, other roots started to surround him. His opponent somewhere close, watching, trapping him. His hits against the wood intensified. Seeing the approaching threat, he slashed out against the continued growing amount of vines and flora trying to overtake him. In his frantic slashing, he failed to notice a spider creeping into his armor. Suddenly, the sharp pain in his arm and sudden numbness in his right arm. His sword fell out of his grasp. Quickly thinking, he finished cutting the entrapping wood root with his shield. He stood up, finally noticing something crawling up his neck. Risen threw down his helmet with a steel hand grabbed the spider and threw it. The spider crawled through the underbrush, turning into a snake, blending in with the ground once again. Risen started moving quickly, his right arm still numb from some form of venom from the spider. He felt his arm freeze. Frost started developing on his armor as steam whisked out as well. The frozen extremity stopped the poison from reaching the rest of his body. He kept moving, every rustle of leaves putting him on edge. It was only a matter of time before something caught him. And catch him, it did. He stepped through a small bushel and suddenly his vision flipped upside down. Getting over the shock, he looked up to see his leg ensnared again by a wooden vine. He tried to reach up and cut at it with his shield. That is until another vine shot up and grabbed his left arm, then his other leg. By the end, he was trapped, upside down and with no arms or legs to use to escape. More and more vines wrapped around him until finally even struggling wouldn't budge the roots a little. He would hang his head in defeat if he wasn't being held upside down. Emerging from the jungle was the familiar face of Savi. "So, wanna call it now?" she asked the upside down knight. "You used poison. I can't feel my arm." Risen replied, slightly snarkily. "Yes, and you slashed my leg. I think we're even. Besides, you'll be fine in a bit. Probably." Savi replied. Risen sighed before smiling. "Good match, Savi. Well fought." The trees immediately receded, letting go of Risen, letting him down gently before withering away. The sandy arena back to how it once was. He stood up, and Savi handed him back his helmet. "Thank you, and again, well played." Savi smiled before walking back to her entrance, and Risen went to his side. He felt lightheaded slightly as the blood that rushed to his head now made its way back to the rest of the body. The ice coating his arm melting, the void magic taking care of any poison remaining in his system. He leaned against a wall, waiting for the next match to be called, his body feeling almost lighter than before the start of the fights. He starts to pace. So this is one of those examples of environmental beatdown. The thing is, right, at first, like, even Savi, when she messaged me to sign up, right, said she wasn't a fighter, but by nature of being a dryad and having druid, like being a druid and all these, and also shapeshifting, it essentially turned a 1v1 into environmental horror. I'm gonna put it in I lose but put up a fight. I think it also very, like, if Savi was limited to not being able to do all of the plant growth in the arena, then I'd say it'd be a one-sided other way, but because she can, you know, I'm going to say I lose but put up a fight. That's probably where it ultimately ends. If again, this is just my best estimate. Again, after some time goes by, the arena doors open. This time, in floats an interesting being. At a glance, it appears to be a swath of clothes and materials with a floating head. However, to those close enough, they hear a clacking noise, dry and hollow. The odd skull of the creature looks distinctly not human, with two large fang-like protrusions and a horn out one side of the head, and a gem embedded into its skull. Its eyes glowed green with eldritch power. "Everyone, please welcome Bone Overlord, Shadow. We welcome you to the arena," Brock said. "Oh, thanks for having me. I always love an opportunity for a little fight," said the Bone Overlord. After another minute, Risen also entered the arena. He waved to Shadow as Shadow waved back with a bone hand, temporarily leaving its cloth confines. After a little wait, the bell rang. Seemingly, nothing happened, but Risen stood oddly still for a moment. The moment was interrupted by Shadow. "Huh, strange. Risen, I know we're supposed to be beating each other to a pulp, but are you aware you don't have any bones right now?" This was enough to confuse Risen, as well as others. Elaborate? Well, I suppose I should phrase that better. You see, most of the bones in your body seem to be replaced by, what I would guess, be void? I mean, you have taken a lot of hits, some more brutal than others. How many bones have you broken? There's a silence as Risen ponders, not really having been thinking about the overall effects of repetitive void healing. Anyway, it appears most of the bones in your body were either crushed and replaced, or at least damaged enough that the void is a claim on them, which annoyingly means I can't just have the fastest KO of the duels. Risen breathes a sigh of relief. Anyway, I suppose it's a good time to fight, so let me just do one thing. Risen about to act before suddenly feeling something snap and erupt from his body. Snaking through his armor appeared a single rib. Sorry, I had to get the only bone that wasn't completely destroyed. Risen, meanwhile, went to a knee for a second as he once again felt a heavy layer of ice over the open wound. He stood back up. Shadow, on the other hand, took the rib and took something else out from under his cloth. A familiar-looking spine was mended onto the rib, and with a quick test, a whipping sound could be heard from the rib and spine creation. Risen, now standing up, charges forward. However, seeing his opponent's eyes glow, he watched carefully, his instincts correct, as from beneath the cloth a large stream of eldritch energy shoots forward. Risen dodges and tries to keep moving forward, but finds himself needing to keep running to left to avoid the continuous beam of magic. Risen lunges left before using the lowered stance to quickly roll under the beam, allowing him more room to run towards his opponent. Shadow, noticing this, ceases the beam and resorts to much faster short bursts of magic blasts. Almost like a well-oiled machine, the bullet-like magic projectiles rain down on Risen. Using his shield, Risen tries to block as much of it as he can. His run comes to a halt as he braves the hail of magic. Many hit his shield and armor, causing little scorch marks and divots to be made within it. Risen felt the armor shake as it braved the onslaught. Finally breaking the flow of magic, Risen dashed forward. This did not much shock Shadow as he seemed to nonchalantly stare Risen down. Risen got within striking range. With a two-handed slash, Risen brought the sword down. It slashed into the cloth around Shadow. Underneath were many bones. In retaliation, a fist-like formation of said bones came out and slammed into Risen, pushing him back. The large bone-like fist retracted. Instead, the spine whip cracked the air as it snapped towards Risen. Risen pushed forward again, tanking once again a crack of the whip. He tried to slash again, but this time was met with a wall of bones. Said wall then attempted to swat Risen out of the way, but he backstepped and at the last second. What Risen couldn't dodge, though, was another huge beam of magic that was 5 feet from him, sent right as the wall of bone passed by. He put his shield up, but his arms vibrated and ached with the constant increasing of pressure. The beam was enough to slide Risen back 5 feet before it ceased. Risen pushed forward once more, hoping to find some crack in the defense. He gripped his blade tighter as he switched to a two-handed grip, the blade once again hissing as the blade became longer. Shadow punched with a large bone-made fist, but Risen dodged underneath, this time stabbing into the mass of bone. With immense effort, the blade stabbed and stabbed deeply. Risen withdrew and backstepped, avoiding another attack, while also blocking a crack of the whip on his shield. The Bone Lord stalled for a second, before something happened. His form started to grow, stretching the fabric covering his mass of bone. From the enlarged state of Shadow erupted many arms of bone, wielding sharpened bone at the ends of each. Now towering over Risen, each arm slashed down in the ferocity. Risen took as many on his shield as he could, as the final arm in sequence attacked, cut bone appendage, severing it. As it temporarily fell to the ground, Risen stomped on it to shatter the bone. He quickly rolled out of the way shortly after, seeing another volley of sword swings. Again, he repeated the process of waiting for the last and cutting before shattering the bone in an attempt to render it unusable. The sequence repeated again until Risen felt something from behind stab him in his back. One of the arms had reached around and stabbed him in the back. It lifted the knight slightly before dropping him. More slashes, and magic was once again being fired. It was only a matter of time before the knight's guard crumpled and eventually he himself as well. The flurry of strong and brutal attacks in a never-ending torrent proved too much. The knight stood there dazed and brutalized. One bone arm reached out and simply pushed Risen's form over. Throughout the fight, the armor of the knight stayed clean. However, inside the armor, the body was desperately repairing itself. The match was called, the victor being Shadow. Slowly, after the void healing started, Risen sat up and looked at his opponent. Good fight, though next time might need to be more careful of those attacks from behind. That one flank attack really broke your guard, the Bone Overlord said to the knight. Fair point. By the way, you earned the spine and rib. Keep them both. The spine whip seemed fairly useful. Risen chuckled before slowly standing up, still shaky on his feet. A bone hand extended from the now recondensed bone mass. Risen shook it before exiting the arena, Shadow exiting his side as well. Yeah. Hear me out. Things go really bad when you're fighting, 5 tons of bones? Full control of bones, dead or alive? Bro. Some of these fights you can kind of tell, should the person have wanted to, they could just end the fight like that. Like, zero issue, zero problem whatsoever. They could just, boom, gone, deleted. But I wanted it to be a bit more fun than that, so any fight that seems like it lasts too long, consider it less that I actually stand a chance, and more so, if anything, just having fun. So, like, probably, I think Ghoulie could beat me more. Actually, it's kind of hard. It's a hard. These two are Ghoulie and Shadow are about even, to be honest. The final fight of the exhibition was nigh. First, Risen entered the arena, his armor cleaned and repaired, body patched up as much as could be done. He looked around and thought back to the fights that had happened, a small smile on his face. Broken bones and hundreds of bruises aside, it had been fun. It had been a fun experience. This time, he at least knew his opponent. So he was not surprised as he saw semi-glowing white eyes emerge from the shadow of the arena entrance. Standing in front of him was a being made of void, deep purple skin, nigh pitch black hair with a hint of purple, while the inside of the hair glowed blues and pinks, 2 blue horns, and an almost featureless face, except for 2 white eyes. In front of Risen stood Void Queen. Brock stood up for what would be the finale of this. Everyone, please welcome the Queen of the Void and ruler of the toy box, Void Queen. At that, Void Queen looked around briefly and then to her opponent. Just like the spars, right? Risen calls to his opponent. I would hope not. Gotta make you put in some more effort than usual before winning. Hey, I've won before. Yeah, when you sick your bird on me. I had nothing to do with that. Risen looked up to the spectator box. Right, Gerald? A disturbing, distorted voice akin to Risen's replied back. I plead the 5th. And after that, the bell rang. Risen looked back to his opponent, shield out and sword drawn. Risen moved forward. He had fought Void Queen before. He knew of most of her abilities. He dodged to the left as a chain shot through a portal that opened from behind. When the chain missed, it retracted. He kept moving. 5 portals opened around the arena, taking shots at the quickly moving knight. One managed to nail him in the side. Slowly, more and more portals opened, scattered around the arena, different angles and locations. Risen was in a constant state of dodge, block, and run. Even when he cut some of the chains, new portals and new chains would take its place. He wouldn't find perfect dodges, though, as he felt 2 chains ram into his back, and another one finding his kneecap all at once while guarding against others. This caused him to stumble. Quickly rolling to the right, he narrowly dodged a set of chains aimed for him from above. He looked up to see Void Queen having just been pacing back and forth as her chains let loose in a constant state of attack. Risen kept moving, dodging and blocking more chains, but making ground. Void Queen, noticing this, stops pacing and stares down at the knight as he gradually gets closer. There wasn't much in the way of an opening, but the knight dashed towards the queen. A chain nailed him near the kidneys, causing an eruption of pain, but pressed on. Risen pushed and swung his sword. Void Queen, seeing the swing seemingly without moving, moved backwards outside of the swing's range. Risen kept pushing. For every swing he would take, he was met with multiple chains hitting him. It was not looking like a good trade-off. However, given the options, Risen pressed forward. Risen took a large telegraph swing towards Void Queen, before quickly changing grip on his blade and stabbing forward. He landed one hit on the queen, his sword having stabbed into her side somewhat. Her form disappeared and reappeared about 30 feet away. The area of the cut is already healing. Risen gambled. He ran straight towards the queen, disregarding the multitude of chains impacting his body. Bruises flowered, but he pushed. By the time he reached her, the previous wound had already healed. When he slashed at Queen, she swatted the blade away with her hand. In return, Risen clicked the switch in his shield, and in new position, shield bashed Queen. Queen disappeared before reappearing behind Risen, kicking him in his lower back, sending him tumbling to the ground. A chain wrapped itself around Queen's arm, and she willed it forward. It then wrapped around the midsection of the knight. With a flick of her wrist, the knight was sent flying. His back impacted the arena wall. This time, Queen moved forward. A chain wrapped around each arm, striking the sand as she moved forward. 5 portals moved with her in an arc above her. Risen got up. He saw a chain flying towards him. In a fluid motion, he blocked the hit with his shield and used his sword to cut the end. 5 chains shot out from the portals and converged on one point, where Risen stood. He threw his shield up, and was pushed back about 2 feet by the force of the chains. In the moment, Queen used the chains around her arms to wrap around Risen's feet, tripping him where he stood. Falling on his back, Risen was being dragged again. Reaching with his sword, he cut the chains around his feet, using the momentum from the drag to roll onto his feet. Queen continued her assault with chains. Realizing he has been on the back foot for too long, Risen decided now is the time to try something possibly stupid. Risen angled his sword to his side as the next chain came at him. This time, however, Risen grabbed and then wrapped the chain around his shield arm. The pressure of the chain dented the armor, but Risen used this to his advantage. He pulled the chain towards him and used the pulling force to launch himself at Queen. There is a brief moment of shock as she is put off balance. The knight practically flew forward and once within striking range let out a powerful upward strike. The sound of a chain breaking can be heard. Risen, not fully knowing if he pulled anything off, quickly swipes at Kween's legs with his blade. It connects again, but before it can go any deeper, Kween once again dissipates, reappearing farther away this time. Risen is able to see his work. Kween's right arm is currently missing, though regenerating rather quickly. For the first time in this fight, she looks oddly annoyed. Not mad, just annoyed. More chains start shooting towards Risen, forcing him to dodge. However, Kween casually walks to the center of the arena. Risen, thinking he sees an opening, moves toward her. That is, until his vision is robbed from him. To the spectators, it looks as though a pillar of pure darkness consumed the arena, with the only thing offsetting the dark being a small occasional wisps of purple smoke. Inside, it is quiet. Perfectly quiet. No sound whatsoever. Risen stands there for a moment, looking around. He can't see anything, not even his hand in front of his face. The sound of cheering and chatter from the spectators is gone now. Though in reality it was only maybe a minute, to Risen it felt like an hour. Nothing but pure and utter dark and silence. He heard his heart and the blood flowing through his veins. He reaches and takes off his helmet, hoping that taking it off can reveal something he is missing. There is nothing, pure dark. He stares into darkness. Though somewhat modified, this quote does work extremely well here. If you stare into the void long enough, the void will stare back. A huge set of slightly glowing white eyes appear in front of him. Then more and more appear surrounding him. No matter where he turns, there are white eyes staring down. Then, breaking the silence like thunder, Kween whispers behind Risen, "I see you." Risen slashes behind him, finding nothing. Momentarily fully lost, he notices he suddenly sees the faint outline of his hand. Or rather, the gauntlet reflecting. As he turns around, he sees iridescent smoke billowing in purples, pinks, and blues, slowly growing brighter. Then, from it, emerges Kween. Though different, where before she was taller than Risen, she now stood even taller, seemingly almost double his height at a glance. Her hair grew more wild and wavy, as if floating through water. Her horns changed. Where before they were simple horns on top of her head, they now grew, but more importantly, seemingly formed a mask, almost helmet. Void energy radiated off Kween, like fire underneath her. Wherever she went, her chain on her left hand now itself glowed with void energy. Risen, for not the first time today, felt at least briefly afraid. "I see you weren't going all out in the spars," is all he could really say. No, I wasn't. When before Risen struggled to dodge 5 or 6 chains, when he bore witness to the dozens of portals arcing over Void Queen, his jaw dropped. He looked down, let out the briefest chuckle before looking up. Shield up, and running forward. The first volley of chains were sent. Where before the chains would only move in a straight line, he knows how the chains were almost tracking him. He braces his shield with both hands. The impact sent him flying. He was stopped by a somewhat soft surface. He turned around to see a large bear with stitchwork and button eyes, its fur purple. Risen backstepped from a claw, looking behind to see another volley of chains coming for him. He used the little distance between him and the sentient stuffed bear to quickly slide under the bear's belly, all while sliding his blade across the underside. The bear collapsed, and shortly after the bear was desolated by dozens of chains. Risen hopped over the bear and sprinted towards Kween. As he ran, he saw something rise from the ground. Slowly walking and stumbling towards him were a gaggle of toys, mainly consisting of plushies. Looking up, he saw another volley of chains being launched at him. Instead of blocking, he dodges, still being caught by about 10. They drilled into his torso, breaching his armor and going into his skin before receding. Ice clogged the wound. He got up and kept running, now approaching the line of toy soldiers. He crashed into it, toys throwing themselves into him, their weight disproportionate to their size. He kicked a swath of them, sending them flying, but more kept landing on him. The chains were readying their next volley. There was no time. He dashed forward, pushing his body to keep going. He was almost there. He approached the towering form of Kween. 10 feet, 5 feet. He put his sword at a horizontal angle and slashed. Moments before the blade could connect, the Queen of the Void disappeared, appearing another 60 feet behind where she stood. The toys became too much, the weight of hundreds of them piling themselves onto him. He fell to his knees and tried to claw forward. It felt like the ground itself was trying to pull him into it. Maybe it was. After all, at this point he fully realized this was the void. Maybe only a fraction of it, but this was the pure void. The figure he was trying to fight was only maybe part of the battle, when she controlled everything around him as well. This fight could have been over in seconds, but Kween chose for it to go a bit longer. In her own domain, as soon as she showed even a slight amount more of the power of the void, it was a written conclusion outside of the knight's control. There he laid, being buried under hundreds of toys. He felt something grab his hands and pull. 2 chains lifted him by each of his wrists before standing him up. The void pulled back, being absorbed into Kween, her form going back to the regular state. And then the sun broke through. Kween calmly walked up to the thoroughly beaten knight. I think that's the fight, wouldn't you agree? The mouthless Kween asked. Yeah, probably. I would say well fought, but that was so one-sided I don't think it counts as a fight, more as a beatdown, Risen said, still not having moved from his position being held by the chains. I mean, you did handle the first phase better than usual, but you really gotta work on that next part, she said, the chains holding Risen up, receding as he dropped to a knee. Also, do I need to, get Ghoulie to carry you out, or? She asked, the knight still struggling to get up. No, I'll be fine. Just need a minute, he said, now feeling the cold, empty feeling of the void energy going through his damaged body. She started to walk away, and slowly but surely Risen got up and made his way to the exit. The fighting for the day, over. I'm going to be generous and say this. I'm going to be very generous. Very generous to myself. First phase Kween, maybe. Super unlikely, but maybe. There's a chance of beating first phase Kween. Second phase Kween, it's over. Absolutely over. Part of the reason I wrote that I technically beat first phase is that way we could actually see the second phase. Also, from previous weird offhanded statements, technically Void Queen and I have sparred before, so call that just kind of knowing your opponent a bit. And second phase, though, having not really experienced that before, it is a one-sided onslaught. Essentially, Kween bringing the void into the arena itself, almost like a hole in reality. There was no hope. No hope. What I noticed is I almost wrote the Kween fight as a combination of a lot of the previous fights. Specifically drawing from Savi, Shadow, Chara, and a bit of Ghoulie as well. Just all 4 of those fights almost, and all the things that made them challenging opponents shoved into one. Savi's environmental, being able to control the environment, Shadow essentially being unbound by limbs and just being able to constantly launch barrages of attack. Chara, again, the teleporting with the kind of correlating to the chains, and that's also why there was a previous statement at the Chara fight of if the fight went well, he had to make sure to thank his aunt to dealing with teleporting stuff. So overall, I that's kind of why I decided to do the fight as I did. Again, it was just a one-sided murder fest. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. Hopefully that was worth the wait. Hopefully that was worth 2 weeks in advance of letting you guys know this is gonna happen. Obviously I wanted to kind of match the music to the fight, so for Kween, the first phase was The Void by Spirit Box, followed by Rotoscope, because Rotoscope takes a lot darker, almost horror-esque feel to it. And I felt like that was very fitting. For Ghoulie, Animals by Architects. I again, one-sided brutal beatdown, but almost an animalistic ferocity from both sides. Or at least that was how I tried to write my OC a bit more. Was not going again. The main thing I want for my OC is he just doesn't stay down unless he can't get up. Let's see here. Brock, I meant to have Lord of the Rings play, but I completely forgot. Aariion was Zelda boss music. Omen was a song called Feeding Frenzy. Omen got the song Feeding Frenzy. Shadow got Necromancin' Dancin'. Lamb got a Dark Souls 3 Nameless King. Savi got Carnivore by Starset. Kara Onishi got the Flowey song from Undertale. And I think that's about it.